Thank you for that again, Daniel, and we do need prayer at this time. I'm going to call on J-Ray now to give us a bit of an update on the WISE work that has been done. I think that sounds so good. The disaster WISE work. Yeah.
It does sound that way, doesn't it?
It does. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for an update.
Oh yeah, for sure. So as you guys probably remember from one of our monthly meetings, Leslie had asked for volunteers. So I believe it was Beth, Roger, and I think I'm saying the right names. We joined together, and with Leslie, we met and discussed the WISE guidelines that, Reverend Megan and was it Reverend Sarah? Is that right? They both had kind of walked us through the process of what would it mean for a church to become a WISE church, which that is meaning that we're going to be more.
Uh-oh. Did we lose her? Could be we just lost her.
Am I back?
Are you there? Yes, you are. Thank you.
Did I come back? Okay.
Yes.
My phone just like completely went blank. And so anyway, I don't know what happened, but so anyway, we met and through the WISE guidelines. From there, we found a documentation that a church in Colorado, the First Congregational Church of Boulder, utilized to create their WISE covenant. And we followed that document and then met and walked through step by step each of the things that they had done, and then tweaked the language with their permission to replicate or represent disaster ministries. So that's what we've done, and that's what Leslie has provided to you is the final document from us. It's our final draft, and we would like you guys to take a look at it and then give us your feedback. I think we've got a date set on deadline for feedback on June 10th.
Okay.
I have absolutely no idea what's happening. Back. Did I come back?
Yep, you are back now. Mhm.
Okay, I am so sorry. I don't know what's happening with my connection. So I'll finish this and then see if I can get more stable. But we've asked for you guys to review the document, provide us feedback by June 10th. And then we have some other work that we want to do so that we can get everything finalized. So I think that's the update that I have.
Right. That's good. Questions? First of all, does everybody know what it means to be wise? Are we familiar enough with that? Or do we need just a quick overview of what that might mean?
According to Socrates, it means that we know that we don't know anything.
Yes. Thank you, Greg. I know that for sure about myself. So we're
I
talking
am the wisest person.
the welcoming, inclusive, supportive, and engaging for persons with mental health and brain disorders and other mental illnesses, and to really go ahead. So just thinking through, like, how would we be more inclusive in our work in disaster? And so this conversation and that working group determined that we would not only determine that purpose, right, but that we would then offer to you all a covenant. And if you would look at the covenant, read it through, and provide any feedback to us as J-Ray shared by the 10th, that would be so helpful to us to make sure that we're really outlining this in the way that you all could share with others, maybe others in your team, maybe your conference, okay, so that we can work on becoming more and more wise in disaster ministries. And then a call to action. And this is action steps that we all can take together or that you could take individually. Sorry for all the it didn't turn out very well on this display, but it is in your inbox, this document. And I've already gotten a couple of thank yous for creating this document, because that some of you have already said this would be useful in the work that you're doing in your conference. And maybe you could even place it in your plans, your disaster plans. This is another aspect of your disaster plans that you could add it to. Certainly you could use it in training, but we would make this pledge together in July. If you'd like, we could do that in July or August, over the, together, reading it together and agreeing together that this is a pledge we'll take together. What do you think before we move on?
Leslie, this is Carl. One of the things that Steve and I are doing at Penn Northeast Conference, one of the things we're meeting with the conference minister next week to talk over a bunch of things. But we had a cabinet meeting, kind of a planning meeting of all the program leads a couple of weeks ago. And Penn Northeast Conference has its own WISE committee, as they're trying to move the conference to become a WISE conference. And so we've begun discussions with them, and I've shared this document with them, and already starting getting some feedback from them about it, and some ways in which we can move together to try to move the conference to become a WISE conference.
Excellent. Thank you. That's good to hear. Any other?
I think it's,
go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a great move. The congregation that I'm a member of is a WISE congregation, and I think actually the Southwest Conference is moving to be that way, if it isn't already. And it just occurred to me as we were bringing this up in Las Vegas, New Mexico, where the disaster field office is located, I believe. There is a significant mental health institution and hospital in Las Vegas, and it just reminded me, I wonder what happened there. So it would be something to find out, because we should certainly be sensitive to the needs of those who are challenged otherwise. And
Leslie,
as we know, depression is such a natural part of disaster recovery. It really needs to be something that we're aware of on so many different levels. I like it. Thank you for your efforts.
Jerry, did you have a comment?
Where did you say we would find these documents? In the Google groups or in our email, or where?
Yeah, you'll find it in your email, and I can also upload it then into the MS Teams, right? So that everybody can have access to it at MS Teams. I'll do that tomorrow. Or any one of you could request it from JRay too. They have the documents there.
Yep.
Other comments? I'm sorry, I might have interrupted you. Okay. Well,
actually, Leslie, I do have a comment, and I don't want to water down the statement, but it appears to me to be kind of a spiritual lens to look at all people, not just those with, I think everyone has their issues. And so, but we're focusing on one particular group, and should this not be an attitude from one human being to another human being without putting labels on?
Mm-hmm. And
So that was actually something that
Helen is, just before you respond there, I think Helen was trying to speak and maybe is on mute. Okay, Helen.
Sorry about, Yeah, I signed on. I just realized I'm not under my name. I'm under my church thing, but that's okay. Just going to comment that, you know, it's an intersectional thing here with being wise and being wise with disaster management. And the UCC Disability Ministries, we put out some information, and the American Association with People with Disabilities that I put in the chat put out some great resources after the violence that occurred this week, so that we have resources to help children, you know, recovering from the aftermath of such violence. So that's another way, and it's really intersectional. And it's a matter too of ensuring that the resources are accessible as well to individuals that might be interested in them. So I know that what we do is I try to make the material I put out, ready.gov I put out this week as well to help for persons with disabilities or whatnot, but I put out resources for aftermath of gun violence as well to help children, also to make sure our children with disabilities are able to participate in being able to share what their feelings are, and making sure that we're making the resources in alternative formats so they can participate, whether it be making pictures of emotions or feelings to give them the opportunity to express themselves in their grief and recovery, as well as find a spiritual support from us as a community. So it's my comment.
Thank you so much. And was that you, J. Ray?
Yeah. What I was going to add to that is I was going to first recognize that we on the committee agree that other people are, you know, set to the margins of our society, and it's easy to go, well, we should just be doing this with everybody. But as a queer person, I can assure you that sometimes your labels are where power comes from, and that's where the visibility comes in. And so I think that it is important to have a WISE document specifically speaking toward, you know, those who may have, you know, be on different levels intellectually, or be on different levels because of mental health issues or whatever. But we do understand that there are some other folks out there. Maybe we need to be inclusive of them as well. Maybe we need to be explicit. I don't think it's a bad thing to be explicit when you're talking about a population that is historically and currently set on the edges and left out of the conversation. If we're going to have an inclusive table, it's okay to say who it is at the table.
Well said. Thank you. So as we're beginning to think about this together, thanks, Greg, for that. As we're beginning to think about that together, let's reflect on this. We've got some time, and we can extend the time if we need to. We can talk further about it in July and August if we want to spend more time thinking about this. But if you have recommendations for how this could be adjusted and so forth, it would be helpful to see some of these ideas in writing. But we will also be talking about this as a team on the 13th. So if you want to join us in that conversation on the 13th, happy to have you join us. Okay. Good. Thank you. Thanks for this feedback. Very, very definitely. Now, for the majority of the rest of the time together, we're going to be looking at the work of another working group who's been working like all last year, honestly. Let me see if I can end this part of the. Let me see if I can now share my screen again. Possibly you see this. Would that be true?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And someone else is trying to join us. Let me see if I can bring that individual in. I should give someone else power here so that I'm not doing everything. Someday I'll learn how to do all of this together. The the committee that has been working on this, how about you raise your hands if you've had any little part of this work here? That would be Fred and Scott. And yes, Coral. Yeah. And Bryce, thank you for that.
Davina,
Davino, yeah, joined us. Exactly. And Kim, thank you, Kim, for your contribution to this. Chris Phillips, who is not here yet.
the Mattins.
Did you all join? Yes.
Yeah, the Mattins are here, but not,
Yeah.
their sound is turned on. Their video's back now. Yeah, yay. Good to
So
see.
we really appreciate everyone who participated in this process. And that is people who participated in the video. And then we had a working group. And so some of those folks that initially raised their hands were in that working group. There's someone who's trying to get in and I seriously cannot figure out where they are.
Okay, yeah.
Leslie, if you want to make me a co-host, I can help you with this.
Thank you so much. I would really appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, Kim's trying to come in. All right. We now have 2 special products that you all can use in your planning, your preparedness planning and training. We'll turn off our speakers. Anybody who's not talking can just close out your speakers and that might help us here. One is the template you see on your left. The template is 15 pages long. And what our idea is here is it gives you an idea of the many different aspects of preparedness that we could be considering in our conferences. It doesn't mean you have to do them all. It doesn't mean you have to know what your conference is doing in every aspect. But as you learn where these resources are across your conference, this could be a useful tool in recording those resources, okay? And we also have then the PowerPoint presentation, which is a series of videos. So what we'd like to do this evening for the remainder of the time together is take a look at the videos and the PowerPoint in light of the template. Okay, and just kind of do it back and forth, maybe as a train the trainer, but also to get your feedback. If you see something in here that's just not quite right, or we're missing a piece, or you'd like to suggest some new things, you can either give it to us in the chat. We'd be happy to receive those ideas in the chat box, or please just speak up and let us know. Okay, are we ready? So we're going to start with the first video, which embarrassingly is me, but here we go. This is the first slide, and of course it's called A Comprehensive UCC Conference Disaster Planning Guide. And again, it goes right along. So if you were going to be doing this training, you'd have everyone in the training course with the template in front of them, right? And here we go. Uh-oh, let's say I didn't figure out how to do the sound. There's sound there. Okay, Greg, you're so good.
If you're sharing the screen, it should also have given you the option to choose share sound.
Thank you. Here we go. Nope, didn't work. So now what do we do? I figured it out before. Sound is up.
Actually, try clicking on it again because it looks like it may be
No. This is important. This part of the process is important, so we got to figure it out.
Yep.
Is it because it's not in presenter mode? It's in.
That is possible.
Okay, so let's do a slideshow. Beginning. And then I've got to reduce it. Oh, yeah.
Is this presentation saved off in the Teams folder?
It's probably too large for that.
Okay.
So wait, what? No, I'm not gonna do that. How did we do this before? So we want to go here. We want to be able to show you both.
I think
Scott,
for watching the videos, let's just go ahead and watch the videos by themselves, and then we can always go back to this dual mode.
you think so? Okay. We were able to do it before. Do you remember, Scott, how I did that before?
This is Helen, and this is just an idea.
Yeah.
The left-hand side, if you're on a computer, it should be down at the left. Make sure that you have select sharing sound mode. You want to make sure share sound is selected. There's a
Share sound, yeah. Share sound is selected.
Is that selected?
Yep. It is. Thank
Huh.
you. It is. So, okay.
Do you, in the more area, you could have had something where mono or stereo or some other kind of selection. So if you look under more, make sure you don't have something that was additionally selected that may be causing it to be compromised.
Okay. There is something selected there that says mono. And I'm
Take-
not. I'm
Take mono off.
I can't get it off. There.
Huh.
It's not allowing me to. Maybe I could put it on stereo. Okay.
Try that.
Thanks everybody for your patience. Sorry. Nope, not happening. Okay. Well, then what we'll do is we'll go back to the slide. And let's see if that works. Nope, doesn't work either. Oh,
Actually, Leslie, go back to the video, hover your mouse over the video, go to the right where the speaker is.
Mm-hmm.
Just click on the speaker.
Okay.
Now push play.
Welcome to the Global Hope Disaster Ministries Conference Profile Project. I'm Leslie Rumeli, your United
Here we go. All right, I'm just going to turn it up a little bit more.
Church of Christ Minister for Disaster Response and Recovery. I'm very pleased to share this awesome project designed and developed by the conference disaster coordinators. To introduce you to this incredible conference disaster profile, it's a tool. We will be inviting, and we have invited, a number of the conference disaster coordinators to share a series of 2-minute briefs on areas of conference disaster preparedness and planning. This group of gifted leaders have tons of experience and will briefly share their insights in readiness, response, and recovery. The first section will focus on the conference leadership, organization, communications, and training. And CDC contact information will be included in that. Also, partnerships, communications, planning, volunteers, donations, training, and time for questions and time to dig in to the information and updates in your plan. The second section helps your conference on the disaster response and recovery capacity, including welcoming centers, sheltering, temporary housing, feeding, food pantries, disaster kits and buckets, environmental and technologically caused disasters, the repair, rebuilding, and overall long-term recovery organizations. The third section focuses on emotional and spiritual care, with questions about the emotional and spiritual care plans, persons with disabilities, homeless, access and functional needs, pets and animal support, with a focus on the most vulnerable in your plans when disaster strikes. And finally, and critically important, are partners, including disaster, nonprofit organizations, voluntary organizations, local community-based groups, long-term recovery groups, nonprofits, and for-profits, other academic institutions that will help us to leverage our resources together. So thanks for joining us, and let's get started on our conference disaster planning.
Okay. So I'm thinking that now that we've figured out the video piece of this, we might be able to do a side-by-side possibly. So we're gonna look at this template now, okay? So the template, the first section of the template that I just described begins with, the conference itself and information about your conference, the number of territories that you serve, states, tribes, and territories that you may be serving, the total churches that you serve, the number of associations, the date, and then your objectives, if you have them. If you don't have objectives yet, of course, you could begin to work on an objective. Even just one for the year would be good. So section A, then we're going to go to the second. So this is the sections, right? So there are 4 sections in the template. The first is response work, and then response and recovery, emotional and spiritual care for all, and then disaster partnerships. Okay, so 4 sections of the template. And we've asked all of the conference disaster coordinators, many of you, to do sections of this to explain those sections. So we're going to start first with Phil. Phil describing the relationship with conference leadership, although he spent a lot of time, and you'll hear him talking more just about the conference and the importance of disaster. So let's start with Phil.
Hi, I'm Phil Hodson, Conference Minister of the South Central Conference of the United Church of Christ. Since beginning to call into this office in July 2021, we have witnessed in our region 2 hurricanes and 1 tornado. In the year prior to my coming, the South Central Conference experienced a massive winter storm. In some of these instances, our congregations came through completely unscathed, praise God. In others, we experienced significant damage to our churches and disruptions in the lives of our members, our neighbors, and our communities. When chaos happens, disaster response and recovery through global hope is a beacon of light in our conference, and we know that we're not alone in making that statement. Conference leadership relies on the guidance and information acquired across a tremendous network that we couldn't collect or maintain on our own. We focus on bringing information back to that network to help coordinate response and communicating vital knowledge in the moment across our ministry settings so that our people receive the help they need and offer it out in their local communities in kind. In the United Church of Christ, we recognize Jesus' invitation to all people as one of being called and sent, where we have opportunity to receive healing and presence and care. We are truly blessed. And even more so when we have the chance to be the hands of Jesus in this remarkable way for our neighbors, impacting our communities as the church on mission.
Okay. So there you begin your training, if you will, or at least in your thinking. What's the relationship you have with your conference minister, and what do you know about the conference itself on your template, you're thinking about what's that status. As a conference disaster coordinator, do we have an active conference disaster coordination process? And who are those people? What's the contact information on those folks? Some of you have already this information listed in an Excel spreadsheet. Maybe you would just say, you know, here's the link to that document. Or you could list it right here in the document itself. And then any backup information, maybe you have somebody that you can count on in times of disaster that would help you. You would want to list those folks too. And information about the past 5 years of disaster, as Phil was just mentioning, you know, since he arrived, there have been already three major disasters in his region. And then do you have quarterly meetings or periodic meetings as the CDC? Are there standing meetings that you attend with the conference? Some of you all actually attend those conference meetings, many of you do not. And so these are questions and answers. And some of this may just be no. I mean, you know, no, we don't have that right now. Or others of you may say, yeah, we do, and we meet on a regular basis. But this is knowledge that you all have about your position, or that you're gaining if you're new to your positions, that can be transferred to others as they take on this job. Because we know that not everybody's going to be able to maintain this job forever. It's a volunteer position. So you can get it down on paper and begin to share this knowledge with others. Okay, that's what planning is all about. The next one, do we have questions, thoughts? I'm going to ask for criticisms too.
There was a comment in the chat about getting captioning for these videos.
Captioning, so good. My goodness. Is that you, Helen? You're so smart.
Yeah, I mean, there's things I can help with, you know, and just kind of direct you, but I don't know what you use to create the videos, but it's a matter of either making them open by using subtitles, and you can do it that way, and or an SRT file. Auto AI does that. There's different programs that actually capture the audio and track it to time, because it has to have a timing. Don't want to get too tech. The other way to do it for now until you get there is just provide a transcript along with it. But in cases like today, with volume being at different levels on these videos, it's more inclusive to have the captioning provided.
Yeah, like that. Very, very good idea. We'll need to discuss this with you further. Thank you. All right.
And just to make a good or bad joke, she's not smart, she's wise.
Wise. I love it. Okay, good deal. All right, so now we're into conference partnerships, next section. And Coral, thank you so much for doing this section for us. Here we go with Coral.
Hi, I'm Reverend Coral Harminter, the UCC Nebraska Conference Disaster Coordinator. I've been asked to talk to you about the Conference Partnerships and Communications States, Tribes, Territories section. This is the section where you archive various partner agencies in your conference. This way, all needed contact information will be in one place when you need it. I have found it is immensely beneficial to start developing these relationships before the next disaster event. You will be better and more quickly able to stand in the gap and help your communities respond and recover. The first questions seem to be self-explanatory, at least to me. In my case here in Nebraska, I represent UCC Disaster Ministries as a member of the Nebraska Volunteer Organizations Active in Disaster, the Nebraska VOAD. We currently meet on the third Friday of each month at 10 a.m. Central Time. The meetings are held in Lincoln. There is a virtual option. Following this section is the place for the names and contact information of your state voluntary agency liaison, or VAL, who in my case happens to be with Nebraska Emergency Management, and your Federal Emergency Management, Val, who happens to be in Kansas City. Then what follows is the area for all of the agencies and partners that you have been or will be working with in the future. For me, this is everyone from Red Cross and Salvation Army to an alphabet soup of federal and state agencies, all my faith-based counterparts, as well as groups like Team Rubicon and Noah's Comfort Dogs. So make this section work for you. It takes a village to rebuild a village or a town. We have better resilience if we start building these networks before we need them. And God bless your work.
Wonderful. So such well done. So yeah, this section is meant to be a place where you put down this kind of information, thoughts about that, thoughts about how you might, again, it could be a link that you've already created this list and you just want to link it to that, or you could embed it right here in the document. Thoughts? We hope that that makes sense to you, that we are selecting areas that would be beneficial. And okay. With no thoughts that we can hear, I know you have lots of thoughts going through your mind, like, what the heck, I don't even know those ideas right now, but let's try preparedness. Okay, preparedness is next. Greg Briggs, thank you so much for doing this section for us. Here we go.
Hi, I'm the Reverend Greg
Oops.
Briggs.
I didn't mean to stop you. What's happening? Let's try this again.
The Conference Disaster Coordinator for the Vermont
What's happening?
Conference and a member of the Emotional and Spiritual
Might be
Care
a
Team
bandwidth
of
issue.
UCC Disaster Ministries. Many of us have heard the phrase, a lack of planning on your part does not make an emergency on my part, or the shorter phrase, your urgency is not my emergency, as a way to talk about the need for other people to be prepared and for a person to not take on someone else's anxiety. But what if we are talking about planning to respond for an emergency? Planning for an emergency is what can make the difference between it being manageable and a full-on disaster. Whether the disaster is naturally caused, climate or technologically related, or human created, the planning we can do now is easily transferable and adaptable to effectively respond to a wide range of needs. Knowing what resources, people, and skills that are available can help take the anxiety out of an urgent situation. Translating and communicating that knowledge into the conference's disasters plan makes it accessible for everyone else as well. So to start off, find out what's already been put in place. Does your conference have a disaster plan? When was it last updated? When was the last time it was shared with the conference and the UCC Disaster Ministries? How can people find it? Is it on your conference's website? And also thinking about individual congregations. Do any of them have disaster plans or preparations in place? Have they identified people or points of contact? Have they registered on the website willingtorespond.org? As you continue to fill out or update your conference's disaster plan, you will continue to find new resources and partners in this work, so that when the time comes for urgency in the face of emergency, you already have what you need in place.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So this section, of course, is about preparedness plans. And we know that many of you have plans, but they haven't been updated in a really long time. So these are just some prompting questions around, have you updated the plan? Even if you haven't updated your plan for 10 years, let's list it. At least put it down. The fact that you have one is a start, even if it's 10 years or older. And you also have the access to all of these plans on the MS Teams account. Okay, so every single plan that I know about so far has been uploaded onto the MS Teams under conferences. And so each one of your plans are there, and you can, just share and use one another's plans. So if you don't have something, please go in there and use one another's plans. Thoughts about this section? Are we missing anything? Okay. I hope you think this is helpful. We love your feedback. Scott, go ahead.
I really like this section, and especially in terms of, preparing the preparation, because that is a large part of what we do during the quiet periods, if you're fortunate enough to have that. And again, I want to make sure everybody realizes this is a planning tool and kind of a gap analysis. It's not, nobody's expected to have all the answers for all these questions, but it's being provided to really help you with your planning process. And you say, oh, I never thought of that before. Just put NA, and you'll get back to it. Or this is something that we want to do, and then you put in an action that you go ahead and do that. And in full disclosure, I was involved in the early stages. I got kind of busy doing other things, and I came back, I think, a couple of weeks ago, and I was really impressed at how this team put this program together. I think you'll find it a very useful tool.
Thank you for that, Scott.
This is Helen, and I can't see the form because I'm low vision. But in the event in this section, it might be nice, since you're looking for points of contact, I didn't hear anybody mention some sort of way of people to have a volunteer registry of some sort within your conference or congregation of people that might need additional check-in or help. I know in Berkeley and in different areas, we do that in cities and overall, but it's kind of like a registry if you have somebody that has mobility issues, or the individual that has mobility issues might have extra supplies. And it helps in terms of a point of contact when it comes to people that might need extra assistance.
Absolutely. And we do have a section about that. And let's be sure that what you've just lifted up is in that section, well documented in that section as well. Thank you.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. And I like the idea of a volunteer registry. We haven't gotten there yet, but that's a great idea. We know that a lot of emergency managers do have that. Okay, so the next section is volunteers. And we were so pleased that Roger was able to give us this section here. Here we go with Roger.
Hi, I'm Roger Dart, the disaster coordinator for the Illinois Conference. I'm going to assert that volunteer labor is the very foundation on which successful disaster recovery is built.
It's breaking up
Following
pretty bad
disaster
on this
events, I learned quickly that shingles don't get nailed into place, drywall installed and finished, or paint applied without the hand of a volunteer holding the appropriate tools. It's for that reason that I emphasize the importance of identifying the folks who will volunteer for this ministry of ours. As conference disaster coordinators, it's vital that we have some idea of how many people are willing to step forward when the need arises. Contacting every congregation in your conference would require a lot of time and effort, which makes this profile project all the more important. When I ask someone if they're interested in volunteering, their frequent response is, I don't know how to do that. My experience says that volunteers don't need any particular skill. Most often, volunteers are assigned jobs that don't require any special experience. Tasks that do have a special skill are given to those who have that kind of experience. However, on-the-job training is often a part of volunteer experience. When approaching somebody about volunteering, I ask, are you prepared to give away a bit of your life? Because that's what volunteering really means. I clarify my question by offering the idea that volunteering goes beyond the satisfaction of doing the hands-on work. It also results in new friendships when we're in a community built around a shared experience. Volunteers can also have the rich experience of meeting the people they're serving, in whose lives they are making what can be a life-restoring difference. Volunteers provide the essential hands, feet, and muscle to get the job done, but they will return home with far more than they have given. Completing our new profile documents will make your job easier and more effective. Blessings and happy recruiting.
Okay, that's great. And so, this section, of course, is focused on volunteerism, and all of you have the opportunity to recruit volunteers, volunteer teams, and to work with volunteers, of course, amassing buckets and kits and giving gifts and gifts of their time. So what are we looking to add to your disaster plan? How are you addressing volunteerism? Is there somebody on your team who's focused on volunteering? Someone who can help you in the organizing of volunteers, and all the specific questions that are listed here. Any feedback on this section for us? Yes, Scott.
Yeah, I just want to comment, Roger, as you know, has been a mentor for our church. And what we find in disasters is that there's an enormous interest early on, but it's the long haul. And he has been, really helped us understand how to continue to participate over the long haul in local disasters like flooding, for example, in our area. But it's really, it's because each individual church, you may only have one or two people in the congregation that are really passionate about the particular issue, and so it's important to network with other churches and as volunteers, and I think that's what I think Roger's online. I don't want to speak for him. I see he made a comment, so but anyway.
Yeah, well, can we go to comments now? You don't mind to help me with the comments? Anybody who's made them there, would you please lift them up for me?
It was further conversations around the need for captioning.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll add that on the side, I have PowerPoint, and this looks like a PowerPoint presentation, right?
Yes.
So PowerPoint does have a function for captioning. So I can send you what I found, and then maybe that
Excellent.
can. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Good. And
okay.
thanks to Fred. I mean, Fred Mead, if we hadn't had Fred Mead on this working group, this would never have happened. It was his idea to do the videos here, and he kept nudging us all along, right? Making sure that we could get this done. But he spent hours on this project along with all of us. But he's really given his all on this, and we appreciate it so much, Fred. Thank you. Thank you. Out loud. Okay.
Looking at the volunteer section, it does look like we've got questions about being ADA compliant in two different places. So that might be a little redundant.
Okay. Good. Okay. We could look at that. ADA. All righty. Let's go on to funding resources. Eddie shared with us on this section. So here we go. And let me just navigate down to this section. Again, we're still in the first section of this template.
Eddie Weathers. I am the Disaster Coordinator for the Southern Conference of the United Church of Christ. I want to share with you some funding resources. When a disaster occurs in the United Church of Christ, appeal for donations to conferences. While we encourage our congregations and individuals to send their donations directly to the national setting, we sometimes have individuals and congregations who want their donations and monies to go to work immediately. At that point, I notice attached indicating where they would like their donations to go. Let me share with you just a few of the funding resources from the Disaster Fund. The Solidarity Grant is for early response efforts within the impact community. It is available for most disasters. There is also Church World Services kits, which includes cleanup buckets, school kits, and individual hygienes. Depending upon the need and the availability requested of the number of kits will be allocated. There is the Long-Term Recovery Seed Grant. This supports early long-term recovery. The maximum amount is $5,000. There is also the grant, a recovery grant supporting the UCC Conference Lead Grant. The amount is up to $7,000 for an initial grant. Maximum amount depends upon the need and the level of the conference engaged and successfully meeting, implementing, and reporting requirements. There is the tool and trailer. Several of our conferences have tool and trailer of various types. It is for reconstruction work and cleanup and marking out. There's a trauma retreats for pastors and conference staff, emotional and spiritual care after the disaster. Volunteer supporting long-term recovery efforts, working to support local recovery. Now, all of these fundings and resources and more may be found by contacting disaster@ucc.org. Thank you.
Okay. So, you know, Eddie went on to really share much more than just funding in this section, but the questions that we're focused on in this section, or that you're focused on, is, you know, your own disaster funds. Does the conference have your own disaster funding? And some of your conferences actually do raise money. And he suggested that maybe some of that money, or all money, could go directly to the national office. And we know that that's not necessarily true, that sometimes some of the funds get raised locally first, and that that money can then be shared with the national office, but individuals, there is an appeal that goes out and individuals can give both ways. So are we missing the mark on this one a little bit? Do you think that the questions that we're asking here help you at least in determining your plans, your funding plans?
Leslie, this
Yeah.
is Coral. In looking at this, under funding resources, does the conference have a disaster fund? That's simple enough, but I'm not sure I understand funding agencies / organizations.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that intended to be those partners that you have that might fund through a long-term recovery or whatever?
Yes, that would be like your foundations. I think we can clarify this better here.
Yeah.
But that would be foundations that you are aware of, or even state
County
funds. Mhm.
Yeah.
Like, for example, Florida has a state fund for disaster recovery, and your awareness of those funds. You see this last week that I shared maybe some funding resources from Buffalo and from Uvalde, just to give you an idea of what's out there, because we may not always do an appeal, but your churches may want to know, how do I give and where do I give? And so this could go into your plan, your template. But we can, I think you're right. We can clarify this better.
You know, this and then down in the section under donations, I'm not sure I understand camps.
Right, and we're going to get to that one next.
Oh, I'm ahead. Sorry.
No, it's all good, and I'm glad you lifted it up now. And let me see, Helen.
Yeah, this is Helen. I'm sorry, I can't read the questions because I'm low vision, so I can't see what's up on the screen. So please forgive me if I'm not to point. I'm going by what's being said, and anything with funding, as I wrote also in the comment too, if you're going to apply for funding that's federal, state, or county, because it trickles down, ADA compliance is going to be very important. Same thing like if your church wants to be a voting poll, if you're ADA compliant, then you have the opportunity to be that. So it would be the same with emergency disaster funds, making sure that you're following what the requirements are to be ADA compliant at your church. It's a win-win opportunity for everybody. It makes more inclusion. Even though a church doesn't have to follow ADA guidelines, you are left out of funding resources in some areas, and following a more inclusive way of being as a church would provide you some of those community resources and a center for your church to be in the community.
Right. Okay. Good. That's helpful. And whether, I guess the question back to everybody, and let us be thinking about that as a working group, is when we clarify funding agencies and organizations, do we want to also refer to governmental funding? Or are we only referring to nonprofit organizational funding and foundational funding? So I think we need to be more specific about that funding approach, Carl.
Yeah, and one of the things to keep in mind there is that now churches are eligible, and when a disaster strikes, churches are now eligible for public assistance if they meet certain guidelines. So those kinds of things, I think, need to be in conference plans so that they can help to educate their churches about the kinds of government funding that now could be available. And this is brand new for the last, two and a half, 3 years.
Yeah.
So I think that would be an important one to have in the plans. It would be the public assistance for houses of worship.
Houses of worship plan. Okay, well, maybe we will add to this section here for that piece. We could also add it under mitigation. That sounds good. Thank you.
Leslie, can I make a couple comments? Just
Sure.
process.
Of course.
When this PowerPoint goes out to everyone, it's my hope that we'll figure out a way to give everyone a thumb drive, because it's about 2.5 gigs. So it's not a little file. And if you receive a thumb drive, or if you're able to download it, if you have very fast internet, it won't be a problem with you being able to download it. I just think that part of what we're doing from the team's perspective, it's sort of like if someone just finishes a PhD program in psychology and somebody asks you, well, tell me what you know about psychology. It's like after 9 years worth of work, you want me to dumb it down to 10 minutes. And I feel like, we have quite a few people with PhDs in various areas of the work that we're trying to condense. And I'm saying this just to say that when you receive this PowerPoint, to make it your own, use the language that feels best for you to teach in whatever way you can to support this whole idea of disaster preparedness and education. So I think, at least as I'm watching this, and I've watched this many, many times, just not being able to hear very well and not having the audio and video sync right, it's sort of, I don't know, my brain can't handle that very well, because I've heard it very clearly. And if you get it on a thumb drive and you actually watch it, I think you'll get a better internal experience of what we're trying to get across.
Yeah. I'm sorry for the audio issues today.
It's all about bandwidth.
Okay. Well, let's move on then to donations. And we're so thankful that we had the Mattins do this section here.
Hi, this is Bill and Ellen Matten. We are the CDCs for Penn Central Conference here in Central Pennsylvania. And we're going to talk to you for just a little bit about donations following some disaster that you may be serving. It's important to emphasize at the beginning that we have learned since Katrina and throughout the other disasters that have occurred here in the United States that the most valuable thing that anyone can give other than their time is money. Now you may find when you're serving a disaster that people will send you things and stuff, but as early as you possibly can to let your potential audience know that money is the most fluid thing that they can share and give, and that works quickly to get the necessary help and aid to those who need it is really very important. If you do accept cash, remember you need a responsible agency and a fiduciary to manage that money for you so you have accountability. The best way for each of you to make the decision who that might be is work with your conference minister staff. They probably will be able to quickly point you in a direction. Ellen's going to talk to you a little bit about stuff.
Despite requests to send cash only, people will send you in-kind donations. Some of them you may actually have requested. Early on, it could be things like clothing and food, later peanut buckets and tarps, and maybe even long-term recovery materials. The activity takes a lot of time away from actual recovery work. You'll need to find somebody who will manage that and will have a warehouse to hold those donations.
And that is a brief, spectacular moment on donations.
That's great. Thank you. And the kinds of questions, are you aware of partnering organizations and agencies that can take donations should a disaster happen in your area? Does the conference have a financial donation strategy? Does the conference disaster plan address donations, including cash and stuff? As a conference team, do you have a donations leader? And are you aware of organizations that focus on managing disaster donations, such as food and other community services? And are you aware that donations can sometimes be disaster within a disaster? So those are the types of questions you'd be thinking about as you think about donations. Financial is, of course, our number one way. Any other feedback here in this section? Okay. And I think the complement of, what we heard earlier in the financial section and the donation section, I think it's very complementary, and there is duplication, but I think that's okay. As you're thinking about your plan, you might be hearing repeated themes. I hope you agree. Okay, and then the last section here is Priscilla, and she did the section on the CDC disaster education program training and just training in general and other themes.
I'm Priscilla Self, the Illinois South Conference UCC Disaster Coordinator. Some of the important aspects of disaster ministries is training, preparedness, and readiness. Does your conference and congregations have a current or up-to-date disaster preparedness plan? When a disaster happens, are they ready to assist victims and those with damages? Most UCC conferences are represented by a conference disaster coordinator, such as myself, that can assist in developing or updating those plans. There are resource and training materials available on the UCC website. That's ucc.org. Click the What We Do tab, then the Wider Church Ministries tab, and then Disaster Ministries. There are also the list of contact information for each of the conference disaster coordinators. You might think that disasters seldom occur in your area, but are there thunderstorms, severe weather threats that could cause injuries, damages, flash flooding, or lightning strike fires? At the very least, I suggest completing pertinent information of the preparedness manual for your conference and each congregation, with contact information for your property insurance carrier, your conference disaster coordinator, your president or moderator, conference minister, pastors, office and maintenance staff, and also the local emergency management coordinator, fire and police departments, and other such agencies within your area. Post this information by each phone in your buildings. Give copies to your leaders and staff and make them aware of their responsibilities. Other training and readiness materials can be found at websites for the American Red Cross, FEMA, local, state, and national VOADs, which is your voluntary organizations active in disaster management agencies, and ready.gov. Be prepared.
Very good. Wonderful. Yeah. And so, now we're getting into a section that we were thinking about as Priscilla's describing preparedness. We also have a complementary profile that we are working on and almost completed, thanks again to this working group, for congregations. So we're almost done with the congregational profile too. And we'll be able to, introduce that to you soon. So comments about this section. So what's the thing, and I'm sorry to, I ask a question and then I go right into my own thoughts, but what I think is so important here is let's log what training we've all had and what training we might be able to offer, what we've experienced as a conference. And, have you had FEMA 101 or 100, 200, 300? Have you had other courses with the Red Cross? And if you have done some of these courses, let's start listing them on your profile. That's for you, the CDCs. And you may also be able to offer training. What kind of training can you offer? Or what kind of trainers do you have within your team or within your conference that could also offer training? So this is the place where you can really put this information down. Other comments?
Kim Vogel just commented in the chat that getting a list of everyone who's CPR certified in your congregations is probably a good idea.
That's excellent. That's excellent. And whether we need to put it here or not, that's the question. Do we need to put it on the template? Should that be an addition here? And if we should, then, we'll take that up. Let's do it.
Leslie,
Okay.
I have a question not about this, but you said before that the group was working on the congregational plan. Is there also a plan to work on the conference disaster plan template?
Well, not yet, only because we think that this template, this conference template, is actually your addendum to the plan. And that not all conferences up to this point, unless you, of course, want to standardize a plan that would be the same for all conferences across the US, we have understood that the conferences want to develop their own individual plans. And so with that understanding and guidance, we determined to make this template that addendum or complementary piece that would, again, keep reminding you of the areas that you could explore and add to your plan. Does that make sense, Greg?
Yeah, sure. Thank
Okay.
you. I think it was Helen in the chat just commented that it might be a good idea to add CERT training. in the list of possible things stands for Community Emergency Response Training.
Yes, CERT training. CERT training, and the other was, oh gosh, I've just forgotten it already.
CPR.
CPR, thank you.
And then just speaking as a relative newcomer myself, like I don't know what EMA and ARC stand for.
Oh,
and
yeah,
I just learned what NVOAD stands for. So
okay. Yes, we need to take out the acronyms and put in the real world. Okay, good. Acronyms.
Yeah, and make sure to do that if it's on the left-hand side. That's what makes it inclusive. So even somebody who speaks a different language would have a key and point. So it's inclusive design.
Yes, yes, yes. Wonderful, wonderful. See, this is why we needed this session tonight. Thank you so much.
And Leslie, this might be taking us down another road, but just something for those of us CDCs who happen to be ordained clergy. In this training section, at some point, we might need to have a discussion about how we can convince our committees on ministry that these disaster-specific trainings can actually qualify for our continuing education that's required to maintain our ordination standing. So that's just a discussion down the road, but it kind of goes into, I think it goes into this in this area, and how we can document this even for our comms to be given credit for it.
That's awesome. Yes. I think we might have some conversation opportunities here. I've asked for a meeting with who our liaison is right now is Mark Ian Stewart. So I'm going to add that to our list, to the conference ministers. Because one of the things I want to do is have at least a 15-minute time frame with them soon. And so, we can add this suggestion into that. Thank you. Very good. All right, so section B, reunification, welcome centers, sheltering, temporary housing, feeding, food pantries, disaster kits, environmental and technologically caused disaster support, repair and rebuild, and then long-term recovery organizations. So we'll hear from a variety of folks on each of these. Okay, that's section B. And again, you could just work 1 year on section A, right? I mean, it's not like you're going to get into all of this in 1 year or even longer. It may take you a couple of years to do some of this work. Okay, so we're going to go with Chris now. Chris, I'm sorry he's not here. Chris was our leader of this working group for a long while, and so.
Good morning. This is Chris Phillips, and I am the CDC for the Minnesota Conference. And I'm here today to talk to you about reunification or welcome centers, along with sheltering accommodations and temporary housing. Shelters. When you hear the word shelter, it usually conjures up images of shelter, safety, security, fortifications, and a place to call your own. It is more than protection from the elements. It is what grounds people to their family and community after a disaster. Disasters, both man-made and natural, can strip that connection away and leave people vulnerable to violence, disaster, disease, malnutrition, and dehydration. After a disaster, shelter is more than a place to rest. It's a place of security, access to food, water, medical treatment, and most of all, the ability to connect with loved ones. It's a place to start recovering after a disaster. Does your conference have a reunification plan? Are there churches that could serve as reunification locations or welcome centers as a gathering place in times of disaster? Does the conference or congregation serve unoccupied minors? And finally, for reunification or welcome centers, are there congregations that serve as sanctuary churches? Well-planned and executed shelter facilities can ease the transition from pre-disaster life to post-disaster life for affected citizens. While many continue to operate into the recovery phase, shelters are not intended to be a permanent solution to housing needs after a disaster. Does the conference have a sheltering assistance plan? What shelter agencies or organizations exist in your conference or association? In the US, shelters are usually run by the American Red Cross, faith-based groups, or local municipalities. During the post-disaster phase, the Federal Emergency Management Association, also known as FEMA, may provide financial assistance for rent or launch programs which FEMA covers the cost of lodging at a hotel or motel for people impacted. As we have learned, shelters and reunification welcome centers play a vital role in any scale disaster and are an important part of disaster response, recovery, and a community survival and existence. Please be aware of where the shelters might be in your area in case of a disaster strike. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Okay. So he basically took on these two sections here on reunification, which he asked a lot of the same questions that are listed here on the template, and then shelter accommodations and temporary housing. And some of the questions listed here get into, you know, does the church have or serve, you know, warming and cooling stations, and do you have a shelter support team? So just even knowing what churches might be able to serve as shelters or have already agreements with the American Red Cross on providing shelter is, you know, something you may be considering putting in your template. So this is, again, you know, a section here for your consideration. Thoughts? Okay.
One of the things that we didn't include that we could have is the importance of churches understanding the need for, the larger churches understanding the need for having a place where multi-agency for family assistance centers or multi-agency response centers can meet, because that's vitally important right after a disaster, to be able to go to one place where not only the government but a number of nonprofits can meet to meet with people who have been affected by a given disaster. Yeah, and that's huge.
Do you think it should be under? Well, we'll consider where it should be in this process. Yeah, that's a good one. Kim?
As I sit here and listen to this, and having looked at this 100 times, I guess I'm having a different outlook and realizing that if you were to ask me whether my conference had a shelter or a feeding plan or anything like that, considering it's in 3 states, my response to you would be totally different than the good folks that basically are all sitting in Philadelphia and have, you know, 10 times the number of people that we have. I'm not sure that we, in the document itself, or in the preamble or whatever, emphasized enough how individualistic this document has to be, because if you're talking double states, triple states in some cases, do you have a sheltering assistance plan? That is going to look so different for every community. I mean, you know, and for the conference to have any involvement in that, yes, there might be a church or two that is involved in their own communities, as opposed to a conference that is more urbanized and it's feasible to get things to each other. And I'm struck by the fact that some of the questions we're looking at here just simply don't apply to some of our geographically diverse and large conferences. And maybe we need to think about how to put that in the introduction a little more.
Yeah, Yeah, really good. Very, very well stated. Okay.
This is Greg Briggs again. I would imagine that we could also include in this listing under sheltering accommodations would be like churches that participate in like rotating shelter programs in the wintertime or
Mhm.
things like that.
We could. Yeah. Yep. So, what this is making me think is that if you all have come up with ideas and questions today, thoughts that you think should be added in, and you haven't put it in the chat, please do at this point, because, I'm trying to capture some of these ideas here, but it would be nice to just be able to pull them all out, and then we'll take them one by one with the team at our next meeting, which is this coming Monday. We're going to meet with the team again to review all your comments. Okay, feeding is next. And we get to hear from Danny. Sorry, Danny's not here tonight.
Aloha. My name is Danny Tengan. I'm the UCC Disaster Ministries Coordinator for the state of Hawaii. My topic today is about food insecurity. Food insecurity is always increased during a disaster. So much so with the largest disaster of mankind, COVID-19. With COVID-19, Hawaii workers who have service occupations who work in the leisure and hospitality industry are more likely to be food insecure because one or both adults are at risk of further hardship, as many businesses have been forced to close and lay off staff. If the situation does not become better, more people may experience food insecurity. Pacific Islanders are particularly susceptible to COVID-19 in Hawaii because they tend to have lots of human contact as frontline workers, such as in fast food or retail. Unemployment in Hawaii topped at 37% as coronavirus shut down the state. Figures from the State Department show that more than 1 in 3 workers in Hawaii lost their jobs as a result of the COVID-19 shutdown. That's because many of those laid off are connected to the tourism and retail industry, which has been at a standstill since stay-at-home orders went into effect, followed by travel-related quarantine. In February, before COVID-19, Hawaii's workforce was about 651,000 strong, and unemployment was just 2.7%, far below the national average. Early in the COVID period, Hawaii UCC Disaster Ministries began a monthly food bank distribution to Pacific Islander churches, as well as supporting several local churches to provide food bag and food ingredients to feed families in need. For the past 6 months, PPE was also added to the food bag distribution. On Thanksgiving Day, our local paper, the Star Advertiser, had as its headlines, "Real demand for food bank services still up." The Hawaii Food Bank has increased their feeding about 46% over the previous year, while Feeding America predicts 15% food insecurity rate. So it's very important to realize that today, food insecurity is all around us, with so many people out of jobs and are still looking to put food on the table. He was hoping that congregations have contacted their elders and asked if they need any help during this COVID period.
Okay, so on the feeding side, including feeding as a part of the conference plan, or in a sense, if you don't see this as one of your ministries, at least knowing where the food pantries are within the UCC churches in your conference, boy, that would really make a big difference, I think. So just consider that. And Fred, did you have a comment?
No.
Okay, you just looked like you had your mic open.
Kim Vogel, you've got your hand raised. Do you have a comment, or do you just need to put the hand down?
Looks like it might just be up from the last comment.
Whoops, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. Okay, any other thoughts about this section here? Feeding plan, and then of course dietary considerations is a big part of feeding plan and inclusive dietary planning, if you were to get into that aspect of things. Okay, next we're going to hear from Bryce. All right. Here we go.
Hello, my name is Bryce Hughes. I'm the Iowa Conference Disaster Coordinator. I'm going to tell you about an important way your congregation can help others after a disaster by being ready to respond when disaster strikes. I'm talking about CWS cleanup buckets and hygiene kits. These are assembled prior to disaster and then warehoused so they're ready for deployment right away. Hygiene kits contain the kind of items that allow you to wash your face, clean up, brush your teeth. Each of the kits cost about $10 to assemble, but what a difference they make, bringing a sense of comfort and normalcy to a family displaced after a disaster. The cleanup buckets contain the kind of items you need to clean up after a flood, for example. They're carefully chosen to fit inside a 5-gallon bucket. Each of the buckets can be assembled for about $75. Your congregation could take on one or both of these projects to whatever level you're comfortable. You can do this project in such a way that there's a price point allowing every member of your congregation to participate. And there is presently a matching grant of up to $250 from UCC Disaster Ministries to help your congregation stretch its resources. As followers of Jesus Christ, we're not responsible to fix everything, but we are called upon to do what we can, and all of us can do something. The best way to respond to disasters is to be prepared. Hygiene kits and cleanup buckets are a gentle touch, a reminder that people are not forgotten, a reminder that God's love has not abandoned them. Thank you for all the ways you do ministry in the name of Jesus Christ.
Okay, good. Are we missing anything in this section? Any suggestions? That was great, by the way, Bryce.
This is Helen, and since I can't read what's there, this would be a good section to have adapted equipment also listed. Because I think it's really important for churches and conferences to know, like, because you may have people with disabilities who lost their wheelchairs during an emergency disaster. So it's always good to know what adaptive equipment you have for those needs.
Yes.
Commodes, for instance, very important.
Yes. And it could be that we also cover that under the section we call access and functional needs. We may actually cover that too, but let's be sure when we get there, and I'll try to read off some of that so that you can take a look. Okay, yes, Scott.
Yeah, I just wanted to share. As you know, Roger Dart had a. We're still working on a challenge bucket for the conference that for the Northern Illinois conference that Roger's coordinating. And in preparation for that, we kind of stumbled across something here that we weren't expecting from Home Depot. Now, Home Depot has a foundation that that gave our church, I guess it was $3,700 for purchasing 50 buckets, or so that we could pack 50 buckets. And so it's just something that is available out there, and we can share some information on that. We do have kind of like a little guide for our conference that you might be able to go to your local Home Depot, tell them you want to pack cleanup buckets, and there are grants available from Home Depot. So I just thought I'd share that with everyone.
great resource. Thank you, Scott.
Sure.
Yeah, Greg.
Yeah, I would just add, I'm looking at this list of things you have. Conferences or congregations with warehouses, but if you do church world services, they have local depots, usually in the spring and the fall, and then you have your year-round depots. It might be nice to make a mention about, do you know where your local depots are?
That's a great idea. Yeah. Did you put that, if you don't mind, put that in the chat too. I love that idea. And even a link to their map. Yeah, that might be perfect as a resource here. That's a great idea. Okay, good. Next section is environmental and technologically caused disaster, and that was Kevin.
Leslie, before you click
Yes.
play, Bryce Hughes has commented about making sure there's a space to add any groups that are already handling adaptive or medical equipment, to make sure that's a place that's listed.
Yes, good, 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 good. I have it listed here too, but definitely want to add it. Thank you. Yeah, you know, this is wonderful. This is exactly what we were hoping would happen today. We are so grateful that you all are giving us this feedback. We're excited and we hope that this is going to be a useful resource to everybody. Now, why does it say cannot play? Really? It says it's loading. QuickTime cannot play. Darn, darn, darn. Okay, this one, Fred, was the one that we thought we had licked here. Darn.
I did switch it to an MP4. I'm wondering if this is an earlier version.
Maybe. I don't think so though. It was the last one you sent me. Maybe if you happen to have that version, or even that video, we can always show it separately. We can give you rights, but we can come back to it.
Okay.
And sorry, Kevin, all the ones we're missing. Is he still here? Yeah, there you are, Kevin. I apologize because you did you did such a great job with this. I like, here's the silent disaster. Read it through and see what you can come up with, you know. The questions here was, does the conference have a plan for climate, environmental, technologically caused disaster impacts? Does your conference have a creation justice? Churches have creation justice with the commitment to care for God's creation? Does your conference have a known Superfund site? If so, where? There's probably more than one in almost every state. There is. And now we know, because of the work that Danny has done with Red Hill, that almost every military base has some kind of nasty pile of junk that is running into the water or that is, doing harm to the earth. Okay, almost every military base, and we have military in our families, so it's not, we're grateful. We just had Memorial Day. I'm grateful for everybody's service, but almost every military base has got to look at their issue of disposal. And then, can you name any technologically caused disaster in your conference? And that would be super helpful to the newly forming technologically caused disaster, climate caused disaster working group, of which we have 3 people on so far. And we'd love to have more of you join that new working group, which will start in July. And then, should any of the above happen, aware of any support agencies. So do you know if there are, organizations within either the United Church of Christ or outside of the UCC that you could call on or build relationships with, environmental? So those are some of the questions that we've asked in this section. Any feedback on this? Really disappointed we didn't hear from.
I have one question. What is considered to be a technologically caused disaster?
Yeah, so there is a definition that the United Church of Christ has, which I guess we could put and maybe should put here, but it's usually that which is caused by chemical spills or Superfund sites, human caused, and things that come out of the technical part of our lives, factories, like we were talking earlier about the lead poisoning factory that I don't think he's still here, but in Baltimore that, you know, we're looking into. So it's that kind of.
We had a factory fire in Illinois that required the evacuation of an entire community. And it burned for about 4 or 5 days. So it was a significant displacement.
Oil spills, chap piles, you know, from coal mining, you know, the list goes on and on. Yes.
This is Helen. Because we are in a technology age, anything having to do with a power outage, because here in California with fire seasons, they actually shut down the power. So it's not a fire you have to be prepared for. You also have to be prepared for power outages that are done to avoid a fire issue. So that's, you know, and that shuts down everything, access to everything right now in a technological age. So.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good example of how it's.
You don't have a telephone, landlines, you know, what are some old school things we can be doing and teaching each other how to use hand radios and whatnot, because these things are going to be important for any emergency disaster.
And we don't have a ham radio network within the UCC, but that's been on my mind of late. So, you know, even just maybe we need to ask the question on this, because I'm sure there's ham radio operators within your conferences, but we don't ask that question yet. So, you know, it'd be nice to know what those handles are. And if you really needed communication, you can always count on the ham radio operators. Right, Steve? Am I right there? Yeah, you were going there. Okay. All right. Moving on then to repair and rebuilding. And we don't have Alan on tonight. That's too bad, but.
Hi, my name is Alan Coe. I've been involved in the UCC disaster response now for almost 20 years. And the UCC has had a long history of repair and rebuild and being involved with long-term recovery after disaster. And to me, what's so important about repair and rebuilding a person's home is home is where everything starts. When a home is put back together, people can go back and live in that home. Families can go back and create a new normal in their residence. And I've seen it firsthand over and over again when families have the opportunity to move back into their home after losing everything. And there's no greater place to be in that moment when that happens. There was one time a person wanted to continue to work on a project. And I said, no, you have to come to the dedication we're doing. And after the dedication, he told me, now I know what you mean. Because it's not so much about the physical work, even though that is important to get a home built, but it's the emotional and spiritual connection that all people have with their home that makes the difference. And to have church people involved in that process, it's really just doing God's work here on the face of the earth and helping out one family, one person at a time with the talents that we have. Thank you very much.
Okay. Very good. So anything that you see in this section that maybe could be added or helpful? So, you know, having a repair and rebuild plan, or even just, you know, having teams or teams for support. I know Kevin is going through this right now, trying to get teams down to Dayton. Carl's been working on Eastwick for, you know, nearly a year, maybe longer. And course, Greg, you're working on Western Kentucky, trying to get teams together. So this area of repair and rebuilding is happening in 3 of our conferences right now in a very substantial way. So thinking that through in advance is really important. Comments here? Okay, we're getting towards the end here. Next is long-term recovery, and Greg shared his insights into that with us. Here we go.
Hi, my name is Greg Dank. I am the disaster coordinator for the Indiana Kentucky Conference. Our conference's disaster ministry has been involved with disaster.
We've got bandwidth issues again. Sure.
Recovery for 22 years, which covers preparedness, response, and long-term recovery. What I will be discussing with you here is the importance of being closely connected with your community's long-term recovery group. Long-term recovery groups form after a disaster. A common phrase used in disaster recovery is that all disasters are local. What that means is that the organization of the long-term recovery groups consists of partners in the community where the disaster occurs. My conference's disaster team consists of 10 members who live throughout Indiana and Kentucky. These members are involved in their local communities through the local COADs, which is Community Organizations Active in Disaster, our state VOADs, Volunteer Organizations Active in Disaster. And these members are critical in knowing what is being done or needs to be done after a disaster event. We encourage our churches, and I would encourage your conference churches as well, to become partners with your community long-term recovery group to be better prepared to assist in the recovery effort. I would even encourage a member of your church to take the lead position in the long-term recovery group in your community. You know, another aspect of recovery the UCC strongly supports is solidarity grants, long-term recovery group seed grants, and disaster recovery grants. United Church of Christ Disaster Ministries, Global Hope, offer these grants to the local communities to help with the disaster recovery efforts. Securing the finances to complete recovery can be a challenge, so your conference and churches can help in this way by applying for those grants. Please encourage your conference and congregations to partner with our local community's long-term recovery group. Reach out to your local conference disaster coordinator to see how you can become involved in your own communities.
All right, so any thoughts about this one? Just even knowing the long-term recovery groups in your state, we are working on a project, I think I've told you this before, with National VOAD to map those long-term recovery groups. And eventually, I think you'll see a product that you'll be able to go to and identify where the long-term recovery groups and COADs and VOADs are across the nation. It will be a map that you'll have access to, and you'll be able to see a drop down that gives you points of contact. So we're excited about that. We can always add that in. But in the meantime, at least the organizations that you're working with locally could be added here in this section of the template. Other thoughts? Okay. All right, the next section is emotional and spiritual care capacity, but it actually goes into more than just that. It's emotional and spiritual care, it's disability, seniors, homeless, and access and functional needs, and it's pets and animal support. And we start with Fred, who describes the emotional and spiritual care.
Hi, my name is Fred Mead. I'm one of the conference disaster coordinators out in the Northeast, and I wanted to share with you about the importance of disaster chaplaincy. It's so important in the various conferences across the country to know ahead of time who can provide support to churches and pastors across the nation if in fact a disaster happens. And that could be a large-scale fire, it could be an earthquake, it could be a tornado, it could be a flooding, it could be a winter storm. But what we do know is that these events seem to continue to rise, and it is part of the healing face of Jesus for us as a conference and as a local church to be able to provide those resources to churches, to boards of deacons, especially in those initial weeks that follow a disaster. So I would encourage people across our great nation to make sure that you have people who know about disaster chaplaincy. Now, not all pastors are disaster pastors. You need specialized training so that you know what to do, you know, the normal signs or normal reactions that people go through when they have been through a horrific event, and you know how to mitigate and help people deal with those responses. So I just would encourage you to look at additional training to be able to identify also chaplains in your community or pastors that have had special training in trauma-informed care that you can call upon should something happen in your local community. And as always, you can always reach me through Leslie at National Disaster Ministries if you want more information. Thank you and have a great day.
Okay. Good. Any feedback on this section on disaster, emotional and spiritual care? You all know now that we have an emotional and spiritual care team made up of 10 people. We have one more interview to do when that person is ready for the interview process. For now, anyway, we may open it back up again. But that doesn't stop you all from identifying people to serve on your team for emotional and spiritual care support. And this group will also be offering training soon. But questions here include, you know, does your conference have a plan for emotional and spiritual care? Are there trainings for trauma-informed care? Can you list the agencies that might be able to offer disaster spiritual care? And then are there chaplains in the conference? And does the conference or individual churches have Stevens ministry or parish nurses that could be utilized in times of disaster? And are they trauma informed? So those are some of the basic questions there. Any thoughts about this section? Okay, the next section is lengthy and was shared by Davina. Or let me see, wait, I'm going backwards. Sorry, didn't mean to do that. But before we go there, we did take a little bit of a step into family planning. Just wanted to show you this.
When disaster strikes, is my family okay is the first question on everyone's mind. Having a family communications plan is a free and easy way to help ensure that families can check in and reunite after a disaster. To start a communications plan, write down contact information for your loved ones. Include home and cell phone numbers and also locations and phone numbers of places they spend their days, like work or school. Designate an out-of-town contact, someone who lives at least 100 miles away. Plan to have family text the out-of-town contact in an emergency to check in. Know where to find trusted sources of information during a disaster. Find local radio and television stations that carry emergency alert system messages. Smartphone apps like those from FEMA or the American Red Cross will deliver useful emergency notifications like severe weather forecasts. Follow local government and responding agencies on social media as well. Having a communications plan is a great first step on your family's path to preparedness.
So we just want to make sure you're being prepared too, because we want you to be ready and your family as well. We hope that that little piece maybe could be helpful as you do training.
I would suggest it.
Leslie,
Go ahead.
I think the name family planning is not, it ought to be changed.
Okay, we can.
Because family planning sounds like you're deciding how many kids to have.
That's good.
You know.
That's well.
That's the next video.
Oh, that's the next video. Okay.
That's good. No, not that's perfect. Let's definitely put that in the chat too. We'll change that. I think that was that misnomer there. Thank you so much. Okay, now we hear from Davina on supporting persons with disabilities, seniors, homeless, access and functional needs support services. Here we go.
My name is Reverend Davina Jones. I serve as the Conference Disaster Coordinator here in Northern California Nevada Conference. It is an honor to serve alongside with you in my conference and also in this role. Today I pose this question: when a disaster is upon us, what about the people with disabilities, and how should we get involved? Conference and local church preparedness is an ongoing process. There's no one answer fits all. However, we can be mindful of those who need extra support in a crisis. I would like you to consider those in elderly homes, shut in, relying on wheelchairs, life-saving breathing machines, those with little to no physical activity in their limbs. How are they being supported during a disaster? What are their medical needs and transportation needs? At your conference, have a list of agencies, community housing, local churches who host as emergency shelters where there is no room at the end. Do you, as conference leaders, know which local churches are wise, welcoming, inclusive, supportive, engaging for LGBTQ and gender nonconforming persons? Are you an accessible to all church, A2A, or centers that have ramps and lifts, accessible bathrooms and showers? Disasters can be very traumatizing. I still panic myself when I smell smoke, wondering, is that my house on fire again? Lastly, I want to stress the critical point. It's not enough to know the local locations of safe places. It is necessary to see and to know who the contact person is in every area of your conference, local churches and community. Please make sure that your disaster plan and directory are updated yearly. One call can make all the difference in the world. It can be a peace amid the storm for someone to feel heard, supported, safe, and with clear directions of their next steps. Thank you.
Really well done. Thank you so much. All of you are just doing such a beautiful job here of communicating. So this section is probably the longest section in the questions that we're asking. And it includes things like, listing the agencies that we might be partnering with, listing the WISE churches in your conference, and accessible ministries, the disaster plans, and whether you have, disaster plans that include disabilities and access and functional needs, and even where all of your senior centers, retirement communities, childcare facilities, preschools are located. Just knowing where they are is a part of just being aware. Yeah, so there's a long list here. Also includes transportation, includes homeless, mental health, and health concerns, languages. I know we're losing people as we go here, and we're almost finished with this section here. So any thoughts? I know probably we've got lots of thoughts, but any additional thoughts that you may all have on this section? It's an important one.
Leslie, this would be a good place to insert that resource on where the equipment for special needs, the supportive equipment could go.
Yeah, I agree. That's good. Let's be sure we just add that into that. Yeah, thank you. Okay, just 4 more slides and we're done. So this is the household pets and animal support.
It is estimated that over 2/3 of all households in America have pets. Most all pet owners consider their pets a member of their family. There are many Americans who have emotional support animals or service animals. If a disaster strikes, what does that mean for our pets? Hi, I'm Kayla Hankey, a conference disaster coordinator from the Northern Plains Conference. Another piece of planning for a disaster is knowing what to do with household pets and service animals. Having a pet and being uncertain of what to do with them is a main reason people choose not to evacuate their homes in a time of disaster. A pet disaster plan should include food, water, medications, and leashes, crates, or any other items you feel are necessary. It's a good idea to have these items set aside with your family's own disaster preparedness items that can be quickly accessed. If you have a pet and must access a community shelter following a disaster, where will your pet go? As service animals are welcome at disaster shelters, but your pet will likely need to stay somewhere else. What organizations work with pets and service animals in your area? Do you know if your community has an animal shelter you can refer people to? If not, can your UCC church become a household pet shelter? Do any members of your church have comfort dogs that could provide services to those who have been affected? We should also take into consideration the different types of pets people may have. Most pet owners have dogs or cats, but there are many other types of pets as well. We need to encourage everyone to have an appropriate plan for their pets to ensure their needs are met at the time of a disaster too.
Yes. Such a great job Kayla did. And other thoughts about this section on pets, household pets and service animals? Well, we hope that this has been an inspiring section on emotional and spiritual care support.
I think it's important that everyone realize it's not that the conference has to necessarily have a household pet in place, but there are agencies in every state that will provide it. And you just need to know the name of the agency and who to access, who's a lead there.
Yeah. Thank you. Well said.
Leslie, can you explain what the POC acronym is?
Yeah, Emergency Operations Center.
POC?
POC, point of contact.
Point of contact.
Point of contact. Yeah, and we'll do, I think we'll go through this again and make sure that we eliminate the acronyms. But thank you, Steve, for that reminder. Yeah, so we're nearing the end here. This is section D. It looks longer than it is, but these are the subject areas here. The conference partnerships, national and state BOADs, local COADs, long-term recovery groups, disaster agencies, nonprofits and for-profits, and then other academic institutions. So we hear from Kim on most of this on this section here.
Congratulations, you've reached the end of the profile document, section D. I call it the Mr. Rogers neighborhood section. Mr. Rogers always said that when times get scary, we should look for the helpers. You could always find someone who is helping. I'm Kim Vogel, Conference Disaster Coordinator for the Central Pacific Conference of Oregon, Western Idaho, and Southwest Washington. In this part of the profile, you'll be listing the names and contact information of all the helpers in your response area. Start with the most important membership, your state BOAD, or volunteer organizations active in disasters. You should already be a partner with this group. If your conference is like ours, you might belong to more than one. This organization will introduce you to most of the major partners that you can add to the rest of this section. This also includes COAD.
Uh-oh.
I could just start narrating if you guys want me to.
Leslie, did you freeze up as well? Well, I think this is Grace telling us that we can finish this out in the next section, in our next meeting. All in favor, raise your hand.
Basically, I just explained what all of those acronyms are and tell you where to go find them. So trust me, you all know what they are.
Well, we missed Carl's presentation to close out.
Oh, is he the closer? Okay.
Something to look forward to at our next meeting.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Well, it looks like our fearless leader is not on, so. I don't know how that works, how we're still on and she's not on.
Somebody's a co-host.
Someone's a co-host.
Yeah, Greg was, but he's not on either.
Oh,
Yeah,
well.
Fred, you're now the host. I just got a little message that says Fred Mead is the host now.
Okay, well, I would be glad to say a benediction and thank you. and have a good night.
Thank you.
So, all right. We'll see you next time.
See ya. Take care.
Be well, everybody.
Be well, everyone.
Great work.
All right.
Thank you for your patience.